Hello, it's Neal Romanek. Welcome to Feed Forum. And AI. You might have heard of AI. A lot of people talking about AI. And still, I'm not quite sure what AI is. AI seems to be, they're telling us it can do just absolutely anything. It's going to change your life. It's going to change the future. It's going to change everything. In what way? I'm not quite sure, but they do keep telling us that AI is going to change everything. But some of us who've been around technology and the media industry for a while have already been employing things like AI, which we used to call machine learning, for some time. As a matter of fact, AI and some of the tools, the principles that ChatGPT and the modern AI revolution is based on, a lot of those tools and principles are decades old. You know, they go back to the 80s or even the 70s, basic principles. They just didn't have quite the number crunching and computing power that we do today. So we're actually going to talk to a couple people today who are using AI in the media industry to solve practical problems. So we're not talking about like pie in the sky. It's going to like solve every ill known to humankind. We're talking about like practical things that AI can do to enhance workflows, improve your media business, solve problems that are just, quite frankly, easier for a machine to solve than a human. So my two guests are Rishi Kapoor and Jacob Arends. And guys, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves, your companies, and what you do. And then we can get into this conversation. Sorry. Rishi, would you like to go first?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Neal, for the introduction. My name is Rishi. I'm the co-founder and CEO of North AI. North AI essentially solves the problem in the media industry around attention. That is our big focus, is around audience attention. We prepare media companies and brands and advertisers for what everyone knows as the attention economy. But what is the attention economy? It is a dilemma where anyone who's creating content, whether it's images, videos, audio, is fighting for audience's attention. And so it's pretty rich to call us as an AI company. We're more of a neuroscience company that uses AI. So we're a neuroscience and AI company that is able to predict how audiences are going to respond and predict attention for any creative content or idea at the very early stages to help creators optimize their content for the best possible chances of getting their audience's attention. And we're solving the problem that far too many, over 90% of the content being produced fails to meet very basic attention thresholds, and most people tune out within the first 5 to 10 seconds. And we think most of the attention, sorry, pardon the pun, most of the focus within AI has really been on generative. How are we going to create more content, create more videos, create more images? Look at all these tools that can create more. And we think the real problem is not about how you create it. It's about how do you know what audiences actually want to consume? And we solve that part of the AI problem.
Thanks, Jacob.
Cool. Hi. So my name is Jacob Arends. I'm Senior Product Manager at Bitmovin. I look after our playback solutions, so our player and observability products, as well as our AI initiatives. So we launched earlier this year a new product line called AI Scene Analysis. What that is analyzing video data on a multimodal level to be able to effectively extract scene level metadata. And the reason why we moved in this way and what we really saw as a problem is a bit similar to what Rishi's saying, not necessarily just from the engagement point of view, but how do you actually get the most out of your content and actually understand it? A lot of our customers in media entertainment, they have various levels of metadata today, but actually it's all kind of at that asset level. And so by giving them this new level of information and metadata, they're able to do a whole range of additional things, whether that's advertising, content discovery, content reuse. There's a horde of use cases. And it's a super interesting thing for us. It's really opened up a lot of conversations and doors. And similar to what you were saying earlier, Neal, that a lot of these concepts aren't new, but with the way that AI is accelerating, it's been a really fast year for us. We've been able to move into a space we weren't in before, and also just launched our AI hub as well. We're basically making all of our products available via something like via MCP, so we can effectively start that next wave of media and entertainment companies actually using our products in an agentic way as part of a solution. So yeah, it's a very exciting time, and thanks for having us on.
I just wanted to add something, Neal. I think what Jacob's doing is incredible because we use tools like this within our company to try and extract out the context behind the content as well. So when we are looking at how audiences respond, a lot of the time it's time stamped, like it's the last 4 seconds are engaging, or there's a peak attention after the first 3 seconds, whatever it might be. But what we like to do is work more with companies like Jacobs that actually can take the metadata out that's more human-like, that's more descriptive of what the video does. So I think there might be an interesting collaboration here after this call.
100%.
Great.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for. If we can, get some collaboration and some teamwork amongst the industry here, that's we've done our job. So, I mean, it sounds like in both cases of the AI tools that you're using, we're talking about using kind of accessing the materials that we already have, the data we already have, or information we already have, and trying to extract stuff out of it. So it seems like a lot of AI is, I mean, you're talking about the idea of using AI for content creation, but in some ways it's better to be able to turn it towards what you already have and to leverage what you already have. So can you talk about, let's talk about sort of for people who may still even be just coming to this for the first time, because AI is something we hear a lot about, but I think a lot of people feel sort of swept away in the conversation without necessarily even knowing kind of what the ground rules are. So maybe could you talk a bit about the tech itself and kind of what's, I guess what is really happening in terms of the technology and how it applies to your tools. I've got a data set there. I've got a bunch of metadata, or I have some audience information. What is actually happening that makes it different from me, just hiring an assistant to go ahead and just look through that stuff and make some notes and send me a report? How does the AI actually work? Either one of you could jump in on that.
Yeah, I mean, look, go on, Jacob.
I was going to say maybe because it follows on naturally with that workflow of how to take the metadata. So, well, I mean, one thing is how much do you need to know? How much do you need to be an AI researcher and be able to understand what's going on inside an LLM to understand why it's effective and why it's useful, right? In its simplest case, it's a prediction model that can predict and find the next most relevant thing to then give you a response back. And you mentioned before the likes of ChatGPT. The idea is that you can talk to it, you can ask it questions, and it will be able to reason and find, based on this question, what's likely to be the answer that you are looking for. What are the kind of descriptors in that?
And that's based on the things that it has learned previously, or that is ingested.
Exactly.
Or been put in the model previously.
We could spend a long time talking about how that works, but the premise of why it's so useful is that a lot of the models that exist that have been trained, a lot of companies up till now, in order to do things like we've done, have had to kind of create trained models, spend a lot of time training on specific data sets, etc. And one of the reasons why this has taken off so much is that you have these foundational models which are available via a lot of the hyperscalers, from AWS, from Google, from OpenAI, etc. And they've made it incredibly accessible to then go and do some of these things. It's lowered the barrier to entry significantly, which I think is the main part of all this. When it comes to how do we use it in terms of in a media entertainment sense, one thing which comes into into the LLMs and something to consider is this idea of modality. So modality is more like text is a modality, image is a modality, audio is a modality. So it's these different types of data sets that you would have to analyze and have to have a model that can understand. And for us, one of the big advancements has been this idea of these multimodal models that can analyze across multiple modalities. So we're able to use some of these foundational models, for example, to do analysis on video. So you can do it across the spoken text, you can do it across the images, you can actually do it across the the video itself. And again, that's really where we kind of saw that problem around being able to find things like scenes. So it's very easy to find out where a shot is in an image or in a video. Sorry, we do that in our encoder all the time for encoding optimizations. But if you take the example of an episode where two people are talking on the phone, but it's switching between these two people and they're on different sides of the one's on the West Coast, one's on the East Coast. Those are individual shots every time you see each other speak, but collectively they create a scene. And so, actually having that understanding of where a scene starts and ends, where that string of context is, was previously a very hard thing to do. It's still a very hard thing to do, but it's a problem we chose to solve. So, that's again the idea that, something there is now possible with these multimodal models, because you can, as I say, analyze the audio, so you can understand there's a conversation going on. You can understand the image, etc. So that's why it's important, and that's why we've been able to do what we're doing now. I hope that kind of answers it. But again, what then becomes really interesting, as I say, is obviously the creation of what do I want to get out of this? What information can I extract? And once you've actually done that analysis and actually be able to get that context inside of your LLM memory, you're able to get that into some embeddings. You're able to do a lot more, extract a lot more, and then it becomes a question of what do you want and how imaginative can you be? And a great example of that is kind of what Rishi's doing. And so maybe hand off to you, Rishi, and kind of how you're leveraging it.
So the way we're doing it is we get a huge bunch of neuroscience data. So for context, we everything we do is based around eye movements, and so we track audiences' eye movement patterns remotely through their browser-based webcam. So we can analyze how audiences are watching content and their patterns of behavior anywhere in the world, and we work with recruited audience pools of hundreds of thousands of people across the world. So if you have a piece of content and you want to predict how a certain demographic is going to respond, well, we'll run a small sample in again, anywhere in the world, using remote eye tracking technology and computer vision to be able to track really small eye movements and blink rates through completely remotely. We essentially turn the webcam into a mini neuroscience device that you can then use to predict and simulate brain activity when people are watching it. And the way we're using AI is it is the best interpreter of a huge amount of data that allows people to interact with that data like they would with a human. And so when I mentioned at the start, we're more of a neuroscience company than an AI company. Our company is called North AI. So we do have AI at its core, but the AI is an enabler for our neuroscience data. We capture, it's our own proprietary data. So we are getting new data. And we're getting around 25,000 to 35,000 data points for every minute of video that someone is watching it. So when you get hundreds of people watching it, which we often do, and for each individual, we're collecting tens of thousands of data points every minute. How does an average person make sense of that data so they can say, how do I make my trailer more engaging? That's really what they want to know, right? Who's watching it and who's getting bored? How do males interact with it different from females? Which characters do they like the most? What plot lines are resonating with who? Like, that's what they want to know. And so that's how we use AI. Essentially, it's a supportive, it's a crutch really that helps people to make sense of the vast amounts of data that we produce on their audiences. So as a creator, you don't have to hire an army of data scientists and analysts to then work it out. You can just use our AI tool to essentially make sense of that data and interact with the data through a chat type system. So that's kind of the main use of our AI. And we have agents as well. We use other models. But the main use is essentially that, to put it simply.
I'm wondering how, because we have this, and we've all seen it, right? That with at least with using Sora or something to create video or to create images, like I can create anything. All I have to do is just do a few prompts and I can create whatever is in my head. And what's often we see is like nobody wants to see what's inside your head, because just having an idea and realizing that idea is not the same as being creative. And so I think there's maybe something interesting that is kind of on the other side of this sort of AI boom. And that is like, how do we develop skills to use AI intelligently and creatively so that we're not just doing what we've always done before and just pour AI on it, and presto, we get more of what we've already had before. So I'm wondering, like, if you've seen and kind of how you worked with AI and kind of maybe what the future might hold, of like kind of what sort of skills do we need to develop, or do people need to develop to start thinking about using AI in newer ways, or more constructive ways, or ways that aren't just, we'll just use it as like a giant hammer to crack a walnut? Because I can see there's that AI is a super fuel for what we're already doing, but maybe the best use cases are some kind of new thing that we haven't thought of. Do you have a sort of sense of that? Of kind of basically, I guess, how do we train the next generation of people to use AI in ways that are smarter than how we use them?
Yeah, I think I'm happy to jump in here, Jacob, because I think that's exactly the problem that North AI solves. Is that if you then say that anyone can create anything from apps to movies to photography just by being at home or being on a train on their iPhone, then essentially the best skill that you can learn in AI isn't how to create, is to understand what people actually want. And that is where North AI comes in. We are essentially assessing, how do you measure what people want, as opposed to, I was watching this BBC interview with Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, and he was asked on the interview, give me some use cases, and he said the exact same thing that every leader in AI says, which is, it's crazy, you can just create a movie from your room. Like, everyone says that, right? It's their big pitch about how good AI is, and that for me, no one's sitting at home saying, damn, I wish there was just way more content to choose when I turn on my TV. I need more streaming services. I need more apps. I need more TV series. And you know what? I want them to be produced artificially rather than with real people, because I want less genuine interactions. Like, no one is sitting at home saying that. It's actually the opposite, right? People are like, I'm sick to death of just like new stuff all the time, and I want to be able to someone to create something that I truly want to watch, right? A recent study showed that 79% of audiences are no longer engaged with what they're watching on TV. So the idea that AI, the best use case is just to create more of it, it's just going to create more of a problem for people. And so I think the best skill that people can learn in AI is to understand people better, is to be a people person, is to understand what do people want to consume, from apps to educational content to adverts to films and TV series. And that's exactly the hole that North AI is trying to fill. And so I'm answering your question, just so happens that I can plug my company at the same time. But it's I think that is a useful skill of knowing what people want, because the how do I make stuff is going to get easier and easier.
I wondered how. Oh, sorry, Jacob. Just one thing. I wondered like what kind of insights you'd might have come up with about audiences and about what people want, because it sounds like um, part of what North AI does is also to explore and understand and try to understand what it is that an audience responds to or needs or wants.
Yep.
Which may not just be, I mean, I can see from the sort of marketing angle, it's like, what can we do to make things sticky, and how can we just keep those eyeballs glued to the screen? Just give me eyeballs, I don't care about anything else. But beneath that, there's something maybe deeper and higher quality of like, how can I really be of service to that audience? You know, not just keep them glued to that screen, but give them something that's a really useful, better experience. Is there anything that you've kind of insights or things that you're working on or have found with that?
Yeah, I think it's so dependent on each. You know, we've done work with sports, we've done work with advertisers, we just did something for an independent film, and so all of those are different because each audience is different, and that is why you part of your previous question was around using data as a predictive model, and what we do is always measure live people. We put humans at the center of AI. Our AI is essentially extracting subconscious behavior from people. And that's why we don't right now automate the entire process using AI, because people's psychology and people's behaviors change all the time. And so what we do, 90% of purchasing decision is subconscious. We think that we're really smart and we're making these purchasing decisions consciously with our brain. And aren't we so clever? But it's not, it's subconscious. And so we need to measure subconscious. That's what we need to do. And that's what our model does essentially. And so, no, there's no, to answer your question, no, there's no common theme because people are all individual. And I think what AI has the habit of doing is trying to generalize people a little bit, and to say we can identify groups and then we can create different models of how people are, and create kind of these human-like chat systems that you are talking to like a real person. And the reality is people are different, and that's what we're measuring. We're measuring how unique people are, when in an age of AI, it's all about trying to automate and standardize everything using previous behaviors. And so hopefully that answers the question. Sorry to rabbit on a little bit there.
No, that's great. Yeah. I'm sorry, Jacob, you're going to go
Yeah,
ahead.
yeah. No, I mean, kind of exactly what Rishi's saying. Like, so, you know, the way we tackle it, right, as you know, we're enabling AI in the sense of we are creating metadata with almost like an open data policy to our customers, where we're going, cool, like, you know, we'll do the analysis, you do what you want. Because like Rich said, not only is every person different, but every streaming service is different. They have a different demographic, they know what they want, they have a different you know, kind of like unique offering. And you know, that's why it's super interesting for me to then, you know, the value in it isn't extracting that metadata and actually creating it. It's then, well, what do you actually do with it? So that's why, you know, I mentioned before, you know, we work with, for example, ad insertion platforms to look at, okay, well, how can we make the ads more engaging? So one of our big use cases is, you know, we understand where scene boundaries are, which means we understand where more natural ad placement should be. So we can actually say, you know, instead of just brutally whacking an ad at minute 15 in the middle of a conversation or in the middle of our fight scene, let's wait until the end of the high action scene. That's probably a better time, or whatever. Also, there's things like contextual advertising. You know, how do you create more contextually relevant ads for a user? You know, I think Freewheel released a study saying that, you know, they saw quite an increase in brand recognition and also engagement with the ads if it related to what they're watching. So if they're watching a beach scene and you were then, you know, served an ad immediately about sunscreen, you're already in that context, it relates. So there's a lot of use cases there. There's use cases, you know, to kind of what you're saying, Neal, about how do you make a better experience. There's also things like recommendations and reusing the content. So again, this is where a streaming service would, I imagine, use the data coming out of North AI. Say, cool, these scenes are, you know, have hyper engagement for XYZ reasons, and you can then feed that into a recommendation engine. We work with a bunch of different platforms there, for example, where, again, they can take our data, they could take North AI's data, they can make that decision around, they understand who this user is, they understand why they're watching on this platform and what their behaviors are. And, say they're interested in car chases, it means that now, with the level of data that we give them, someone that would typically watch Fast and the Furious 10 times in a row might not watch this romantic film, but actually now they know each scene, they know that actually in this romantic film, there is like the best car chase in history. They could create a preview clip using that. They could use that scene as the thumbnail image for that asset, in the rack. They could use it in a shorts experience to, again, increase engagement. So there's loads of things that you can do. And again, to kind of, again, iterate on what Rishi's saying, it's all about like what questions can you ask? How creative can you be with what you have, rather than, okay, I'm going to go and create a whole new asset that's going to delight this customer. Let's actually take what we have. Some of our customers have huge content libraries that get next to no views in the kind of like the deepest, darkest crevices of it, and it's just waiting. It has no ad markers. It's not being used in any of their like kind of previews and promotional stuff. And they can resurface that. If we can give them an automated way to enable that, it then has a bit of a rolling impact. But particularly an industry like media and entertainment, it's such a component based industry. Bitmovin are just a component in a much larger ecosystem. Again, we have our player, we have our encoder, we have the AI scene analysis, and again, that's the point of what I was saying before about us launching this AI hub, is that the whole point of that is to actually create kind of point solutions where we can show off, here's actually what's possible now. An example of that is one of our engineers came up with a project for voice activated seeking. So you use the voice API in the browser, in your TV or in your whatever, and basically querying the AI scene analysis data to say, cool, take me back to when that person was driving through the canyon, or skip forward to where these characters meet. And because you now have that analysis that you've done through AI and the natural language processing that you have in part of that as well, you've created this entirely new way of a user interacting with their content. Again, and it all kind of ties in from different angles. And again, it's a super exciting time for a creative, strategic thinking streaming service, because that's the fun part about all this.
These I'm always think of that example of the it's that Rocky. People's like, watch Rocky, and it's actually ends up being this great love story. Nobody assumes it's a boxing movie, and it's just actually a great love story movie that everybody's shocked and buried in this this story that they thought they knew about. And there's that, how do you find those insights that you wouldn't normally that aren't the ones you're looking for? And I guess that would seem to be one of the real challenges. And we kind of talked about that a little bit so far, but that challenge of AI, of like thinking what you want and using AI to get that thing that what you want. But how do you then find those things that you didn't expect, which is of course where the places people haven't dug, and then you find that real gold there, where you haven't been digging.
Yeah, and like there's other things that go into that as well, right? So you basically just lend, again, as you said, Rishi, like you lend all of this from a data scientist. If you start thinking like a data scientist, you start looking at, oh, cool, well, how can I categorize my content? How can I then do cluster analysis? How can I then run anomaly detection? How can I then, basically, it's all kind of stuff we do in our observability platform. And again, to touch on that, that we've already enabled that via an MCP. So, we now have customers who will use something like Claude Code to effectively connect to our analytics and say, hey, tell me what happened with my iOS startup times yesterday. And we're able to then, they're able to query that data. They're able to use the LLM to effectively understand it, and actually get back some insights around, hey, your iOS times they were through the roof yesterday, but actually this error was happening at the same time. And I also have this documentation which tells me about how to fix it. So actually here's how you go and resolve it. So you can, again, like, that's a data scientist kind of approach to, how do I go and dive into my data? All you have to do is then just apply it to your media stack. And, already, as I say, it's just how creative can you be? What kind of problems are you looking to solve? And how far are you kind of keen to go, really? So, yeah.
So is there anything, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of things, but what would you say is like a really bad use case for AI? What is AI just really terrible at? You're just like, I know, we're going to use AI for our XYZ. And you're like, that's a terrible idea. Don't do that.
Well, I think going back to the original problem that I'm really passionate about is when everyone from Ashton Kutcher, Andrew Chen, as much I love A16Z as a VC firm and the people there, through to Sundar, they've all said the same thing, which is how easy it's going to be to create stuff. And I think they use YouTube as the example because YouTube really made it accessible for anyone to be a content creator because it came at a time when iPhone, the camera came, quality of cameras improved on an iPhone, and editing equipment became accessible. So enabled everyone to be a content creator. And but there's certainly far more supply than there is demand within content creation. There's 500 hours plus of content being uploaded onto YouTube every single minute. And whilst there's 2 billion people, it's literally, I think it's like over 90% of the traffic goes to the top 3 or 5% of YouTube channels there. So basically, it's really fragmented that actually a really small portion eat up most of the demand. So actually, there isn't a supply and demand match. So I think a bad use case is for people to then just start flooding the market with more content. And it's the one that's cited the most, ironically. So I read something that said there's going to be an 80%, we put it in our pitch deck actually, an 80% year-on-year increase in video production through AI from now and 2030. That's an 80, like, think about it where it already is and how littered the internet is with content. It's probably a good thing for Jacob's business, right? Because it's just more videos that he can then ingest. But it's an 80% year-on-year increase in video content. So to say you can just do more of that is probably a bad use case. A good use case for me is actually the exact same tool can be used to iterate and test concepts and ideas early before you go and commit to something longer term. So let's take films and TV series as an example, because we're talking about media. Before, if you wanted to make a film and that film cost, let's say it's $50 million, you would have to go and raise $50 million to make the film. And if someone gave you $100,000, you can't make the film, right? So, but what AI is able to do, and obviously you make the film, you raise $50 million, you produce the entire thing, and then you release it, and then it's a flop. And before working in this, I used to work in the strategy team at Warner Brothers. I was at Universal Studios. Before that, I was at Sony Pictures. So I spent the first half of my career working for major studios. And so I'm very well versed when it comes to major movie flops, right? And they're expensive. They're like $100 million flops because someone spent $100 million producing something that no one wanted to see. It's kind of a really expensive mistake, but it's normalized. It happens. But what I think AI can do isn't to say you can now for $1,000 make an entire film and then release it to the world. I think it's a better use case to say we will make a version of that film But the end thing is going to be, we'll cast similar looking people, we'll bring in AI actors, we will bring in AI music, whatever we need to do to create a MVP of a Hollywood production that's good enough to test out with audiences to see if the narrative, the characters, the scenes, the storyline, the emotions, all that stuff is actually resonating with people. And then I'm going to go and raise $50 million to make the film. Or actually, I can figure out early on if it's actually going to land or not and what's landing. And using Jacob's technology, we can then start picking out all the critical context from the scene and marrying up to what people actually want. So I think a bad use case is using AI to create the full thing and just flood the market. A good use case is using AI to create stuff and test it with smaller groups before you go and do that big thing, right? So that's how I'd see the two. Exact same tool, different use cases.
Could you also be just thinking like maybe the combination of like both the tools that both your companies have? I mean, can you be able? Is there the opportunity to take something like that minimum viable movie idea, and be able to like go, oh wait, this is not a feature film at all. This is a TV series, or this is not actually this is a game. Like to be able to use. And maybe that's too complex, or maybe
but why not A/B test all of them, right?
Yeah,
A/B test all of them. Make a film, make a TV series, make a game.
I think this could be like this is like a slow burn, young adult novel series that you're not going to make a huge amount of money, but I think you could make some decent cash over 10 years.
All of the above.
As you say, you've saved $49.99 million in the A/B testing, so you might as well. Yeah, it's a really good point. As Will Law at Akamai said something to us a while ago. He said that we're in a golden era of AI. I'm not sure if we've already passed it, which was that currently all of the data that the models are being trained on is actually human generated, whereas very soon, as you say, Rishi, if you've got an 80% increase, very soon that doesn't exist, and actually the majority of the data being trained is actually AI use case, AI data. So that to me is more terrifying, and I think that's where it becomes. I think that's, as you say, the kind of overuse for the sake of using it is almost the bad use case, particularly when it comes to generation. Not least just because, even if you're doing it, just you in a personal project or whatever, there's this kind of idea of kind of saturating, the kind of context memory of an LLM. So you can actually start, introducing more hallucinations, the more detail you give it and things like that. And so I think there's a lot of almost like education that should around it, right? Right now, it's very exciting. Everyone's diving in on it. As you say, the barrier to entry is super low. So why not go and create a video and post it online and do whatever with it? But why not use it for all content generation? But I think for me, it's where it should be used is in that context of, okay, I'm using this as a tool to enable me to do something better, as you say. So I'm going to create a film. So I want to use this to do the A/B testing. I want to use this to, help me find those key moments. I'm an engineer. I want to use it to help me, write my code better, help me do my tests, help me do this. In the example of media, right? I want to use this to find where those performance gains are. So yeah, I think it's that kind of saturation, which I think is that's the devil of it, basically, particularly with it being so publicly available, and that kind of the generative side of it being the let's say, the buzz at the moment.
So I'm going to ask the sort of two difficult questions. The first one is so how should we be thinking about AI morally? So, and I mean, in terms of resource use, I would use even the word obscene amounts of energy that are being consumed by AI data centers. Famously, Elon Musk has got his natural gas powered data center outside Memphis or something. People are getting ill, but that's just one kind of high profile example. The idea that we're in this gold rush or whatever kind of rush it is, to create all this computing power, which is eating up, in some cases, eating up green energy that's already been allocated for other uses, and then and blowing past that and going, well, let's use fossil fuels to power these, and then the water use when we're actually running out of water, in a lot of cases, fresh water. So there's that angle of it, and then of course the which I know is not exactly the use cases that you're talking about it, but when we're talking about data sets that may have some dodgy provenance, and we can't always be sure about where those, in some cases it's really obvious where, Sam Altman says we're living in a post-copyright world or something like that. You kind of go, what do you mean by that? But in other cases where you just may not even know where stuff came from. So there's kind of two sides of it, and it's I don't think you can start jumping into using AI without coming in some way face to face with those questions and having to come up with some answers for them.
I mean, well, to I guess to come at both of them. So because kind of we're involved in one, very much not involved in the other one. So there's obviously the so on the content provenance side, right? So there's a C2PA standard, which like the likes of BBC and a lot of the of media companies we work with are looking to implore. The idea of not just knowing if something's been AI generated, but just knowing that nothing's been tampered with, right? There's a lot of news organizations that get in trouble for kind of like dodgy edits or edits that imply a certain leaning of things, for example. But it's an upcoming standard. It's one of those things where until it's globally used, it's not that useful, but it is gaining traction. So there is at least that. Adobe, for example, are really pushing it. So anything generated by Adobe Firefly has these C2PA keys. So if you're on LinkedIn, is a great user, like from a viewer point of view. So if you're on LinkedIn, you see something that's generated by Adobe Firefly, it'll actually pop up the C2PA logo, and you'll be able to see that this was actually AI generated, which I think is great, as I say. But until everyone does it, it's not as useful. From a sustainability point of view, I mean, I agree. It's one of those things that the energy consumption globally anyway has skyrocketed. It's one thing great to say that we've, multiplied the amount of green energy we've been able to do. But if you look at the total amount of energy consumed, that's also gone up. So it kind of all kind of balances out. What I will say is that one of the big things right now is that as the models get better and get faster, they're also getting more expensive, and that's because of the limited compute resource, and because of all the other things that you're talking about. And so I think one thing I'm quite excited to see is actually that kind of that innovation point at which we have to make the hardware more more sustainable, much more cost efficient, much more energy efficient, etc. Just because otherwise you see it now. For example, a lot of I use Claude most days. I use Claude Code, etc. You super quickly run out of usage limits, right? And so, like, if that's happening across the world for however many millions of people, and everyone's seeing performance benefits and efficiencies in their workflows. If you've got companies like ours that are using AI for performance gains in these companies, there's a global demand for a more efficient hardware and system, lower those sustainability problems. So very much the same as the personal computer boom. It will decrease the price of the hardware, and the market will demand it. That's my view. That's my hope. I don't know, Rishi, if you have a similar thought.
Yeah, I mean, my hope is energy. So if you look at cars, invention of cars then led to the invention of electric cars, and then more and then more investment into clean energy, and then even now investment into more ethical batteries for cars. And so the starting point of any new innovation is always going to be quite a lot of disruption to the environment, but then it hopefully leads those companies who are the most responsible for, I mean, the people who are most responsible are the users, right? They're the ones who are going to be generating the demand that then increases the environment. But I don't think you can do anything at this point to tamper demand. So the onus has then got to go on the companies that will hopefully, whilst they're spending huge amounts on the power, will also spend a huge amount on the environmental, to combat the environmental impacts of it. And so I don't necessarily think a solution is to stop building or stop usage. I think both of those things are impossible, and the train's already left the station, I guess, at this point, right? So I don't think you can stop that. What you can do is pressure those companies to also invest in cleaner and clean energy initiatives, as we've seen with the automotive industry, right? It goes to, frankly, destroying the economy to one that's now investing the most out of any industry into sustaining the environment. And I'm hoping the same will happen in AI, which is it's going to be definitely a major issue for the environment. Hopefully, it'll also invest in new technologies that reverse that as well. And so what might come out in the next 5 years is brand new technologies and brand new ways of both making AI more efficient, but also sustainable programs that otherwise wouldn't have been invested in if it wasn't for these companies. But then it relies on people putting trust on those companies to do that. And that's always a difficult thing to do, because we know that when companies are incentivized by maximizing shareholder value, they may not be incentivized to essentially not provide the greatest of returns in order to save the environment. So it becomes political, it becomes geopolitical, it becomes, a bit about capitalism. And, I don't want to get political in here, but for sure. But I think that's probably, for me, the clearest solution that I can see, because I don't think it can come down from people to, like meat-free Mondays. I don't think you can have AI-free Wednesdays or whatever just to try and stop the I don't think that's going to happen. So yeah.
So maybe even loosely allied to that in terms of this idea of runaway technology. People have talked about the AI bubble, which I think there's some sort of bubble that is happening. But is there an AI bubble? What is the nature of that bubble, and what does it mean if, when, / it pops? And are we talking about very different types, again, as we're talking about different types of AI use, whether it's the Gen AI or other types of AI and machine learning? It's a really broad landscape we're talking about. Are those different areas going to be affected differently by changes in the economics around AI?
I'm probably a bit more optimistic about the bubble. I'm optimistic there's going to be a bubble. I'm more optimistic about the impacts of it, because I think bubbles are generally created when people overshoot the use case and the technology, especially investors, right? Investors go create, like venture capital firms will overshoot, and big tech companies will overshoot and spend hundreds of billions on it. And that overreaching, the reason why a bubble can be created, that it doesn't really match the demand. What I've seen with AI is that there is just a lot of demand out there for the benefits that it provides. And it's been built in a way, it's been introduced to the world in a way that's very accessible to people. So think about the last technology bubble, the big one, was around blockchain, right? Crypto's still around, but it's the idea of having Web3 initiatives, digital wallets, crypto payments. And that was definitely a bubble that got burst because people overshot, right? Digital collectibles, all that kind of stuff. And we, had a previous startup, we did some work in that space around Web3, and that was a bubble because I think it came down to use case. My mother was not using a crypto wallet or decentralized systems or anything like that. but she will use AI, right? And so it's become this universal, very accessible technology, which I think reduces the risk, or at least defers this bubble for a later period. And I do see, of all the technologies, it's kind of akin to the iPhone, really, which is that there wasn't like an iPhone bubble or a device bubble. Maybe there was, maybe I just missed the news headline, but there was just demand, right? You can be in a third world country and people will still also have iPhones and smartphones and tablets. So I don't think people overreached when it came to that. And I think it matched demand. And I think with AI, I do think that it's going to, people will have a tendency to overshoot, but I think eventually there's enough demand there to meet supply. The difficulty is when companies just start building huge amounts of, let's say, wrappers over existing models and not thinking about use cases. Things we've been talking about the whole time, which is just creating stuff and not really focusing on any needs or market needs or market wants.
That's really interesting, because if you go to a developing country and say, you guys are all going to get blockchain, it's like, what are you even saying to me? But not everybody, but certainly, pick a developing country, and if they have the infrastructure to enable it, all those people will be using, or a large number of those people will be using or engaging with ChatGPT at least, or something, or AI in some way. Even if it's just out of curiosity of like, maybe this can help me with something or other. There will be engagement regardless. So
Yeah. And also, like, the way that the industry is going, and this kind of push towards agents, right? We talked before about how this kind of like snowball of usage, right? You started using ChatGPT just to ask the old question or to rephrase something, ask it for, all of a sudden it's kind of a bit more in the day to day. This idea of agents and the fact that you can then have them running in parallel to your work. You can have them more integrated into businesses. We talk about it in media workflows, and how you can have it even running on a kind of like a user level. That anyway accelerates the AI usage. It creates, as I mentioned, it creates all the new workflows. And as we said, the train's left the station. Like, you can't go back from that. You can't now tell someone that they can't use an LLM or something for research purposes, etc. I think the only, so, and that's clear as well in like the direction of a lot of these companies, right? Going down these kind of skills and agents, and OpenAI with their agentic toolbox and things like that, right? The kind of application layer of AI, for example, will live out. I think kind of what we were talking about before. I think if there is any kind of bubble, or let's say readjustment coming, it will be on the hardware side of things, and a kind of a readjustment in the price of that hardware, and therefore in the price of running these models and the inference, etc. So I think that's where it will readjust, because if it stays high, then all of a sudden all of those kind of like over use cases you're talking about, right? So people just creating videos for the sake of it, it all of a sudden doesn't become financially feasible to just have a pet project to do that anymore, because it then becomes expensive. It then becomes more of an enterprise thing. It becomes something you only use if you're serious about it. So yeah, I think it's going to be quite interesting. But yeah, it would be how.
I guess maybe the last question I would ask is, what, if I am new to adopting AI in my business, and we're in an elevator, what's kind of the one thing you might be able to tell me that is going to help me, in my day, and kind of help me think about how I might use AI going ahead? We're in the elevator. I'm like, hey, AI, yes, no, what can you tell me?
I would just say, don't rush into using it. Definitely test it out so you can learn it. So definitely learn it to your advantage, but don't rush into using it to create stuff, because people are getting wiser. It's easy now for humans to detect what AI has done, from emails to job applications, to all that kind of stuff. So I'd say to people not to rush into it. It's actually now, weirdly, I think, me personally, are more valuing non-AI stuff, so like actual humans and people drafting things and writing things, because it seems to be a tone of voice when it comes to AI that's becoming more formulaic. And I would say, purely selfishly, because it's what my company does, use AI to test out things with audiences very early on. Use it to your advantage. It can create great things. It can produce great things. It can generate great things. But only you think it's great. Other people might not. So won't you validate that other people think it's great by using technology like ours, and then in turn we can use technology like Jacob's to then help you out even further. That's what I would say.
Can only second it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that definitely, from a product point of view, from a Bitmovin standpoint, as you say, I think it's, how do you take that next step on something you didn't think you could do, on a level of information you didn't think you could do, from a level of interaction with your users you didn't think you could do, but from a personal use case point of view, and also how you lead into that, kind of as Rich said, like, test it out. I think one of the best things that I found to use it for is that sounding board. Hey, tell me about this topic. Ask questions. Keep that kind of, use it conversationally to kind of like, even just test out, ideas, and then you start finding what's that workflow and how does this work for me. I use different tools because they give me different quality of summaries. For example, they're better at different things. Some of them have different connectors and connect to different things. And as you said, Rishi, there's so many use cases that are very specific use cases that a lot of these companies talk about, right? So it's either here's how you create your own video, or here's how you create a vacation planner in an AI browser, which I think I'd love to meet someone that's actually used that. So I think there's a lot of use cases that kind of get thrown at you and kind of forced into this idea of thinking you have to, personally use it in an agentic way. But I think, finding how it works for you and where you can, either you as personally or you as a business, can extract value. I think that's the whole point of it.
Amazing. And I'm just reminded of having seen colleagues, former colleagues who I've worked with, in a post recently, on social media, posting something created with AI that maybe looks normal at a glance, but if you look closely, it looks like it should be in a David Cronenberg movie. So I think just like indiscriminate use of AI can, as you're saying, to create content, if you don't know what you're doing, can be brand damaging rather than brand enhancing. So be careful out there. Rishi, Jacob, thank you so much. Really great to talk to you. And thank you so much, everybody, for watching this episode of Feed Forum. And look forward to hosting you next time for another great conversation.